Have you ever wondered what happened to Adolf Hitler's house after he died? Or Saddam Hussein's palace? Or Gaddafi's compound? Are they still standing? Did someone tear them down? Turn them into museums? Or just left them to rot? The answers are all over the place. Some got blown up. Some became tourist attractions. Some turned into public parks or even a university. One became an actual tomb. Here's what really happened to 8 of history's most infamous dictators' homes, and what's left of them today. Let's start with Adolf Hitler's mountain home, the Berghof, in the Bavarian Alps. He bought the original, much smaller chalet in 1933 with royalties from Mein Kampf, then expanded it into a sprawling alpine mansion with a bowling alley in the basement and a huge window that lowered into the wall for a full view of the mountains. Tunnels and bunkers ran underneath it, and it became the center of a walled compound with more than 50 other buildings for Nazi officials and their guards. Allied bombs left it wrecked in 1945. Then, in 1952, on the exact anniversary of Hitler's suicide, the Bavarian government finished the job. They dynamited what remained of the Berghof and demolished the other buildings around it, worried the site could turn into a pilgrimage spot for the wrong kind of visitor. Today, there's almost nothing there, just a retaining wall and a blocked-off tunnel entrance in the woods. One nearby building did survive, though. The Eagle's Nest, a lodge Hitler barely used because he was afraid of heights. That one is a restaurant today, and you can still eat lunch on the same terrace. Next, let's look at Joseph Stalin's house outside Moscow. Stalin's home, known as the Kuntsevo Dacha, was a plain 2-story house behind a double security fence with camouflaged anti-aircraft guns and roughly 300 armed guards. He lived there for the last 20 years of his life, hosted guests like Winston Churchill and Mao Zedong there, and died there in 1953. After his death, officials actually planned to turn it into a museum. Then, Khrushchev canceled the idea, and the house was just left alone, locked up and untouched for decades. It's technically open today, but barely anyone visits. His desk, his sofa, even his old billiard cue are apparently still sitting exactly where he left them. Stalin had a second dacha down in Sochi too, and that one actually did become a small museum, with a wax figure of him now sitting at his old desk. Now, here's a very different outcome. Mussolini's villa in Rome. Mussolini lived in Villa Torlonia for 18 years, paying the family who owned it just 1 lira a year in rent. He hosted world leaders there, including Hitler and Neville Chamberlain, and had a bunker built underneath the property for air raids. After the war, the villa sat abandoned for about 3 decades, its windows broken and its gardens overgrown. Then, Rome's city government did something completely different from what happened to Hitler's or Stalin's homes. In 1978, they turned it into a public park. Today, anyone can walk right in for free. Families have picnics on the lawn. Kids play near the entrance to his old bunker. There's a museum inside the main building, plus a smaller one called the Casina della Civette, famous for its stained glass windows, and a gift shop too. Next, a palace that stayed locked up for over 2 decades before becoming a museum. Nicolae Ceaușescu's mansion in Bucharest, known as the Primăverii Palace, had 80 rooms, a private cinema, an indoor pool, a sauna, and gold-plated bathroom fixtures, much of it gifted by other dictators. Foreign leaders like Richard Nixon and Charles de Gaulle actually visited him there. Meanwhile, ordinary Romanians were standing in food lines for hours, sometimes for food that never showed up. After his execution in 1989, the palace sat locked and empty for over 2 decades. It was even put up for sale once, and nobody bought it. Then, in 2016, the government finally opened it to the public as a museum. Now you can buy a ticket and walk through his old bedroom, his wife's dressing room, and the indoor pool. His pet peacocks are apparently still wandering the garden outside. Saddam Hussein's story happened on a much bigger scale. He built over 100 palaces across Iraq, using marble and gold trim, even while the country was under international sanctions. One of them, Al-Faw Palace, outside Baghdad, sat on an artificial lake he reportedly used for duck hunting. After the 2003 invasion, most of Saddam's palaces were looted bare, But US forces moved into Al-Faw and used it as a military headquarters for years. Eventually, it was converted again, this time into a university campus, which opened in 2021. Today, students actually attend classes and lectures inside what used to be one of Saddam's palaces. A few of his other palaces became government offices, a hotel, or a small antiquities museum in the city of Basra. Most, though, are still sitting empty, with broken chandeliers and graffiti on the walls, because nobody in Iraq has found the money to fix them up. Muammar Gaddafi's compound in Tripoli, called Bab al-Azizia, covered 6 square kilometers and was surrounded by 3 concrete walls a meter thick, with tunnels running toward the coast and a monument out front showing a fist crushing a fighter jet. Gaddafi actually lived in a Bedouin-style tent inside the compound rather than a conventional house. When rebel forces broke through the gates in August 2011, the compound was looted, open to the public, and partly bulldozed. A local market moved into the gardens, and displaced families later built shacks inside the ruins because rent elsewhere had gotten too expensive. Today, most of it is still rubble, waiting for a government that hasn't found the money to finish tearing it down or build the park that's been proposed. Pol Pot never lived anywhere close to a palace. His final home was a simple concrete hut in the jungle near the Cambodian-Thai border, where he hid out with the last of the Khmer Rouge in the 1990s. When he died in 1998, there was no funeral. His body was placed on a pile of old tires and cremated right there in the open air. That cremation site still exists today, protected by a small roof, right next to a highway, and oddly, right next to a casino. Some tourists and locals still visit it looking for lucky lottery numbers, and officials say pieces of his bones and ashes have been stripped from the ground as souvenirs. Nearby, the house of his second-in-command, Ta Mok, is now a small peace center where visitors can learn more about the Khmer Rouge's final years. And finally, the strangest outcome on this list: Kim Il-sung's home in Pyongyang. The building, called the Kumsusan Assembly Hall, was originally his actual residence and office, built in 1976. After he died in 1994, his son didn't bury him. Instead, he spent somewhere between $100 million and $900 million turning the building into a mausoleum. Kim Il-sung's embalmed body is now on permanent display inside a glass case, in a room once used for meetings. When his son Kim Jong-il died in 2011, he got the same treatment and was placed in a matching room nearby, inside that same building. Visitors today can actually walk through and see both bodies, following a strict set of rules. No talking, and 3 bows at each casket. Before you even get to the bodies, you're walked through a machine that blows the dust off your clothes, and the whole mausoleum reportedly closes for 2 months every year just for maintenance on the bodies themselves. So that's what happened to 8 of history's most infamous dictators' homes. Some got destroyed completely. Some became museums or parks. One became a university. One is still rubble. One is just ashes next to a casino. And one turned into an actual tomb, complete with a dust machine and a strict bowing routine. Pretty different endings for men who all built their homes, assuming they'd last forever.